Welcome everyone. I'm Karine Arden-Dreyer and Remat is here with me. We are both member of ESWN and we are organizing the event in ESWN. And we're very, very happy to have this event today, two-body problem. What is the two-body problem? How are we impacted by it? We've been hearing a lot members from our community, from ESWN, who want to know about this event or want to know about this problem. So we gather 4 amazing speakers for today. And I am sure you're going to learn a lot, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot. So before we start, some housekeeping rules and some information. This is going to be our agenda for today. This is the short introduction that we're going to have. We're going to let you know some of you were not ESWN members, so we're hoping that you'll become member after this event, and we're hoping you'll help us increase our community. So after this little introduction, each one of our speaker will introduce themselves. We're going to have time for Q&A. This is basically going to be a panel from questions you asked us during the registration. We gather the question, we combine them, and we're going to ask our panelists these questions. At the end, we will have some time for Q&A from the people who are in the event today. After that, we're going to break to breakout room. We know that this is something a lot of you have been telling us that have been really meaningful. So you're going to have a chance to interact in smaller room with our speakers. And we're going to sum up the event close to an hour and a half from now and send you on yourself. If you have any technical issues or any question during the event, I recommend that you will send them to question@ESWN. This is Remat, and she will be there receiving your question. If you have question during the event and you don't want to put them in the chat, by all means, send them over to question@ESWN, and this way they will stay anonymous. Please, we want to be sure our event are being done in a most respectful way there is, and all of you have to accept our ESWN code of contact. So if you don't remember, Rima just put it in the chat. Please be mindful to look at it. We want to stay respectful for everyone in this event and in our event in general. All the event itself will be recorded. So if you have to leave for class, for a meeting, to go pick up the kids, or any other reason, you will be able to hear the event because it will be recorded and we will put it on our YouTube channel. We will not record the breakout room, just so you know. The event is fully closed caption. You will be muted during the duration of the event. Again, if you have any question or if you want to stay anonymous and provide a comment, send them to question@ESWN. Feel free to share your thoughts in the chat during the event itself. And again, if you have any technical issues, send them to question@ESWN. All right, we already mentioned this. If you have ideas for future event, feel free to contact us at ESWN event, because we would want to know how can we help you and how can we make more event that will be good for our community. For those of you who are not familiar with ESWN, ESWN is a nonprofit organization that has been celebrated its 20th year anniversary last year. And we're here to create a community for women across the earth science network and increase our community as much as possible and be here for each other. So we're doing these events to help some of you who are applying for jobs, some of you who have questions and want to know things. So if you have any ideas, please send them to us so we can make more events like this and help you. Also, I'll just remind you that in the upcoming AGU and AMS, there are going to be some receptions. So keep an eye on our emails to make sure you are coming and taking part of it. Get to know more women in the Earth Science Network. Today, we're talking about the two-body problem. What is the two-body problem? This is very easily from Wikipedia. There's a term. So a lot of the time, the two-body problem is referred to in academia issues, but it's not just. Two-body problem basically mean we have one person who's applying for a position. In our case, it's an academia position, and the partner needs to find also position. So 2 people in academia. And how do you negotiate? How do you find a position for two people? Does someone need to give up? Does someone road is longer, harder than the other? We have four amazing women who've been in this road. Some have been the partner. Some have been the one who applied and had to find something for their partner. And we're going to hear about their experience of the two-body problem in academia. We selected the academia in the US as part of our Path of Professorship workshop. And if you are not familiar, check our YouTube. We had different event last year on how to apply to American Institute. Although there's a lot of similarity of issues and struggle around the world, we're going to focus today on different institute from the US. So I am very, very honored to have here with us today four academia professors. We have Maria Rogenstein from Colorado State University. We have Rachel Bernard from Amherst College, Catherine Allen from University of Maine, and Alexandra Johnson from Purdue University. Each one of our speakers will introduce themselves now and tell you a bit about their experience in the journey. And then we're going to have we'll open it for question that we collected from you. Maria, I believe you are our first speaker to present herself.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Rugenstein, and I'm at Colorado State University. And I thought I start with when my partner and I moved together. This was after the PhD, which we did on 2 different continents, Zurich, Stanford, back and forth for 4 years. So then he moved to Switzerland, and we were both on a fellowship. We got married, got a baby. And this was a very important first step to me, that the decision to put the family first. I was from the beginning clear cut that I want some kids, so this is first. And actually, in hindsight, this really, really helped me putting things into perspective, being more relaxed, somehow not taking everything so serious, because worst case, if I don't get a job, I just stay at home. Probably I wouldn't, but anyways, it was this alternative universe in the back of my brain. I started to apply roughly a year after I finished my PhD, just because my partner, who is from the US, did encourage me to apply, because it's in the US culture that you apply to faculty positions fairly early. I'm from Germany, so we would start 10 years later after you published 3 books and are super duper senior. So it wasn't I was very insecure and didn't feel like this is for me. My PhD advisor did not encourage me at all. He wrote nice letters, but he didn't pave me the way or anything like this. And then I applied to 4 different positions, 2 in the US, 2 in Europe, and I got 3 interviews and I got 3 offers. And I share this not to brag, but to encourage, because I was in the position of, maybe it would be nice, like, okay, it was my biggest dream, but I wasn't sure whether I'm competitive. And I feel in hindsight, my advisor could have told me that I'm competitive. I didn't know that. Anyways, then we moved countries, still on a fellowship. And my partner got interviews, but didn't get offers. And then during the interview here in the US, it was clear that I had a partner, because I had a baby, and they asked, where's the baby, and so on. But I didn't mention that he is a scientist. We do share the last name, so it would have been obvious, but it didn't come up. So very politically correct. And then after I got the verbal offer, they offered me again, including the whole family, to come over again to find a house and decide on the move, because for us it was such a big move across continents. And at that point, I brought him up, and then he had his interview during kind of my second, not interview, but visiting. Like I had the offer already, but they just offered to make the move easier. He is in a different department. And admittedly, from there, it just happened. Like I just told my chair, and my chair figured it out. So I think we have been very lucky that the university itself is very pro dual hires. I think that's it. I thought in the breakout room, I'm happy to chat about whatever, but I'm happy to cover visa. I know I read through the questions, which was really a big issue. To me, the kids are actually the way bigger problem than the two buddy. If you have 4 buddies and moving them around, this becomes more complex. What else? I also like the question whether the dual hires are actually overrepresented, and I kind of agree, or like I'm not actually sure whether politically I'm pro dual hire, although I totally profit from it. I think there's no way around, but I'm happy to discuss the question. To departments, foreigner in the US, just to sketch out which subject I'm happy to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Our next speaker is Rachel Bernard.
Hi, I'm Rachel Bernard. I have kind of a not torturous, but like kind of a roundabout dual hire story. So I kind of made slides just to help me remember what I had to go back through my emails to piece together the sequence of events. So I don't know if you want to show the slide. Okay, well, I know these are the worst slides I've ever made because there's no pictures that go along with any of this. Okay, so basically in the last year of my PhD, in my 5th year, I had absolutely no intention of applying to faculty jobs. I didn't feel ready, and I just wanted to apply to postdoc. So I had no application materials. I had like kind of heard at the beginning of my final year that Amherst College, which is a small liberal art college, was going to be hiring like several solid earth geologists in the upcoming years. So I was like, oh, that could be good to look out for. And then I, in December 2017, I accepted a postdoc, so I committed to going to UC San Diego for at least a year. And then, so my husband's an economist, and I don't know if anyone listens to Planet Money, but there's a whole episode about how economists have this very centralized hiring thing. It's like all optimized and everyone ends up with a job at the end of it, but it accelerates everything. So it's kind of more like matching almost with med school. So he interviewed in this job market in January. So after I'd already accepted my postdoc, and February 6th, he ended up getting an offer from Amherst College. This was like after interviewing at a lot of places because that's typical in econ. And so as soon as he gets like a verbal, basically he was informed, you will be getting an offer later today, tomorrow. And so as soon as they said that, he said, I have a wife, she wants a job too. And then so after he said that, then the chair of the econ department, who's their hiring committee, immediately reached out to the geology department. At the time, it seemed weird. It's like, wow, you just got geology on the phone that fast. But it's definitely a benefit to being at a small liberal arts college that all the faculty knows each other, so they can immediately be like, oh, I know who the chair of the geology department is. I'm going to call them. And then so they set up a interview. And so he got an offer on February 6th, and the deadline to accept the offer was February 11th. So in that time, we had to fly out to Amherst. I had to do an interview for a job, and then we had to decide whether we were going to accept it by like the end of the week. And so it was really frantic. I had to write research and teaching statements because I did not have them prepared because I wasn't in job mode, and come up with an itemized startup request, which I also, so I was calling people up being like, how much do microscopes cost and all this stuff. And then I ended up accepting an offer for a 3-year visiting assistant professor / postdoc fellow. And so that is pretty and that's not the end of the story. So, okay, next slide. Okay, so while I was doing my postdoc, Neil started as an assistant professor in the econ department. I deferred the 3-year visiting position we negotiated for. I was able to negotiate for a startup, even though it was just a visiting position, which I can talk about. And in breakout groups if people are interested. I started in Amherst 2019, had a baby February 2020, and then like that next year, I gave a lot of invited talks, and I accepted a lot of them because I was told, okay, so backing up, as soon as I got here, maybe a year, I was like satisfied with everything, but starting at year 2, I was already like, how do we make this permanent? Like, I'm tired of this uncertainty. And so I talked to my chair about it, and she was pretty frank that the only way for me to turn my visiting position into a tenure track position was to get an outside offer. She was like, that's what you're probably gonna have to do, because that's the only way we've ever seen it done anywhere at this school. So I gave it a lot of invited talks. I knew I needed to get a job offer. At this point, I was kind of annoyed with the department and the institution. So I was actually interviewing, because it was like, I want to go somewhere I'm appreciated. So I did interviews, and I got 2 offers in the beginning of 2021. Went back to the provost, said I got these offers, and she kind of pushed the geology department to make a decision on whether they wanted to hire me. So I've been on both sides of it, because for Amherst, I was the spousal hire. But for the other schools that I ended up getting offers from, I had to negotiate jobs for Neil. For one of the schools, he would have gotten a tenure track position, and for one of the schools, they couldn't offer him that, but they could offer him a visiting position. So I've been on both sides of it, and now I'm tenure track at Amherst, and I'm happy-ish.
Thank you, Rachel. Being happy is super, super important. So I'm all for that. All right, our next speaker is Catherine Allen.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this. I want to say something before I go into all the details, because it's probably the most important thing. And that is that everyone has a certain combination of experience and skills and perspective and wisdom and talent that nobody else has. Like, each one of us has something that is totally unique, and you are always in a position to negotiate, because you can walk away and they can miss out on that. And I wish someone had really told me that a long time ago. But I sort of came to learn that through experience. But each one of us brings something really important and unique to the table. And therefore, you always have some kind of a position to negotiate, even if you're told flat out that you don't. You cannot negotiate. This is all we have. Okay, you can walk away. So that's just what I wanted to say first. But in my one experience, my N of one, I met my now spouse in graduate school. He was visiting the university where I was in New York to do lab work. He wasn't actually a student there. He was visiting for research purposes, and we met, and he had to come there a lot. So we got to know each other, and then all of a sudden we're dating between New York and Maine. So that was difficult. Long-term relationships are difficult, but there was always the Chinatown bus to Boston, and we figured it out. And then we decided to get married in grad school. We just said, look, this is important, and we're gonna commit to it, and we're gonna just figure it out. And so we got married. And then even before I started graduating, even before I graduated, I started applying for jobs, because I knew, like, this is a challenge. If we're both in the sciences and we're both interested in academic jobs, I better start early, apply early and often. So I started even before I graduated, I started applying and doing interviews. And then we both got postdocs, and he was a year ahead of me, chronologically speaking. So he graduated first. And in that way, that kind of made me a default trailing spouse in that sense. I hate that word, but it meant that he had to apply for postdocs first, just because he got there first and I wasn't ready. And so it worked out that he was able to get a postdoc in New York, which was fabulous because that's where I was. And then I also looked for postdocs all over the place, and ended up staying in the New York, New Jersey area. I did 2 different postdocs. One was teaching focused and one was research. One was a NOAA Climate and Global Change Fellowship, which is great because of its flexibility, which I'll come back to later. And we decided to stay together. You know, we'd spent enough time apart, and it was just like together or bust. And then trying to keep an eye on the time here. We were both applying for jobs for about 4 years, starting in grad school and then going through postdoc time, multiple postdocs. And we got a lot of interviews, but no offers. And that was frustrating. And then my spouse got an offer, sort of unusual offer, was recruited without a search, which I can go into more details in the discussion if you would like, the breakout rooms. But there was an opportunity, it was sort of an opportunity hire, I guess is what I'll call it. And they knew about me already because my husband had been at the University of Maine before, and I don't know, there were a lot of people who knew each other, and they already knew about me. So there was no question of like when to bring me up. They already started there. So I feel like I'm rambling. I'll try to finish this quickly. Long story short, my husband received an offer, and I received an offer that was basically like, we'll give you a desk and an opportunity to raise funding to pay yourself. And I was like, thanks, but I want more. And I asked for more, and I did get more, even though it was really, really difficult for me and for us, because we felt like we were not in a position to negotiate. We felt like we've both been doing this. Neither one of us has gotten any offers. One offer is better than 0 offers. We have to take this. But then I said, no, I said, I want more. I want some kind of income. You know, I'll teach, like I'll do anything. And I love teaching anyway. So I did. Initially they gave me more. They gave me initially a, it wasn't much, but it was a part-time job teaching, and also a guarantee in writing that I would be the candidate for the college for the partner accommodation program at the University of Maine. The university had, it's now been discontinued, which I think is tragic, but they had a partner accommodation program whereby one person from each college could be put forward each year for a tenure track position. And then there would be the president and the provost would then handpick somebody from that pool of applicants. And so I was at least going to be a candidate for that. And the first time I went up for it, I didn't get it. I wasn't selected. And the second time I was put up as the candidate for my college, I was. And that's how I got my position. So it was kind of it was very uncertain. It was a little stressful. It was a lot stressful, but it worked out. And I had advocates, which was really important. People who were in positions of power who were fighting for me. And I'd be happy to talk about that more. And now we're both here and really working hard and really happy that it worked out. And I just would say one last thing. In the breakout sessions, I'd be glad to talk about parenting while doing all of this. I had my daughter in 2018. She's in kindergarten now. And I would also be happy to talk about mental health, which I have had quite a journey in that regard, and I'd be happy to chat about it if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Our last speaker for today is Alexandra Johnson.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alexandria Johnson. I am now an assistant professor in the Department of Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences at Purdue University. My two-body story goes actually back to undergrad. My husband and I met in undergrad, and we decided to get married between undergrad and grad school. And at that time, we saw two paths. We saw a path of applying to grad schools, getting in where we could, and living separately, or trying to stay together. And we chose the latter. And that has really driven everything we've done. And I don't want that to sound like a very trivial conversation. This was a conversation we had over like months and really spent a lot of time discussing. And I think a lot of our decisions and the path that we took and why we did what we did came from discussion between my partner and I, finding the best solution for both of us. So for grad school, we ended up applying to like 12 or more different places. We eventually found a situation where we could live in one place and both attend different universities. And then I reapplied and we got in the same university. So that was great. Didn't have to worry about it again until a postdoc. That came along, and I had an offer in Germany and my husband had an offer in Massachusetts at MIT. And we were in the position at that time to then think about what would be the offer for our spouses in each of those situations and what would be the best for us. And we chose to go to MIT together. And so that kind of started my spousal accommodation route, and I have been the spousal accommodation since. And so we had our postdocs at MIT. That was great. My husband was sort of pinged to apply for a position at Brown University for a tenure track job. He got it, which was wonderful. I still had like 2 or 3 years of my postdoc left, so we were still close. That was fine. It fit our criteria. We moved to Rhode Island. I commuted to Massachusetts, and he started his job. During that time, when he was cementing that position at Brown, we started negotiating because we realized that this could be a long-term position for him, and we needed to find a position for me that wasn't commuting to Massachusetts a couple times a week. And so we discussed it with the department head. My husband let them know after he got the offer. Well, they knew he had a spouse because I was pregnant at the time. And when he interviewed, he said, I might have to go home at any moment because my wife might give birth, right? So they knew he had a spouse, but when he got the offer, we started the negotiations in earnest for a position for me. They offered me a research scientist position, which much like Catherine was a position that I was like, okay, this might work for now, but it's not something I want to stay in forever. I don't want to be soft money. I don't want to have a lot of uncertainty, especially with a child on the way. So I took a research position at Brown and I had my postdoc at MIT. Eventually I sort of took a fuller position at Brown as a researcher and negotiated for a little bit of startup, which we had to push really, really hard for. It's not something you usually get in that position. We were there for about a year, and it became very clear that I was not going to get a tenure track position there. And we also had another child in that time frame. And I will fully admit, I can't deconvolute having children and the stalling in my career. They kind of go hand in hand, but that's okay. It's a decision that we made, and I'm absolutely fine with it. And so when I realized I wasn't going to get a tenure track position there, I started applying other places. And it was very much what Rachel was kind of saying, that I needed the ticket. I needed something from somewhere else, an offer to get an offer at Brown. That didn't happen in that round, but my husband got an offer here at Purdue. And this is actually where we went to grad school. And so everybody knew that we were together. So we didn't really have to say it. It was in the back of everybody's minds. In the process of applying, people shouldn't be asking you these things, and it shouldn't come up in the discussion for your positions, but it was there out in front for everybody. And so he got the tenure track position here. I was not offered a tenure track position, but I was offered something better. I was offered a 50% teaching and a 50% research position with full funding for 3 years. And so that was a really long discussion about, well, does it make more sense to stay where we are or to move? My husband really wasn't changing very much. So it all came down to, what was best for me in the progression of my career. after moving here, because that was the decision that made more sense, to have more security financially, to be able to teach, to be able to essentially do a tenure track job without tenure. We did that here for 4 years, and I reapplied to places. My husband reapplied to places, and we essentially got an offer in hand, and Purdue said, okay, you can now apply, Alexandria, and get a tenure track job. So I've kind of had this this path of being like, hey, I want this thing. Okay, I need to get something else to make that happen. And then working with my husband to find the best route for both of us. And now we have 3 kids, and we've told the department they're not getting rid of us because we both have the jobs we want, and we feel supported in the environment we have.
Thank you so much, Alexandria. All right, so now we're going to move into our panel discussion. Everyone who apply for this event, who register for this event, you provided us with really amazing questions, and a lot of them. We combined them all, and we picked those who came up by majority of you. So we're going to go over now into our panel discussion. We have only 4 questions, but I know we have so many additional questions you would want to ask. So feel free, if there are additional questions you didn't get answered today, put them in the chat. We will have time for Q&A at the end. And I'm gonna read the first question, and the panelists who will answer this question will be Maria and Alexandria, and Rima is gonna put that question into the chat. So the question for you, Maria and Alexandria, when should you mention the 2-body problem? In your application process, in your interview? How do you disclose that information?
So I thought it's pretty clear that you should never say it during the interview stage, but I don't know, maybe I miss, this is what I Googled when I did it. So I mentioned it once I had a verbal offer. I have one horror story of a family member of mine who had an offer, mentioned it too early. No, yeah, she got an offer, mentioned it too early, and then they withdrew the offer after like weeks of back and forth, and her partner not fitting in. So I think I understand it's a very sensible question, and it's hard to, I don't know whether it's hard to find the time. I personally would do it after an offer, not before, because just it complicates things too early. And there's no need for them to know.
Okay. Alexandra, what do you think?
Yeah, so nominally, the advice you get is to not mention anything until you have an offer in hand, because you don't want to have your spouse end up being a point of conversation. And they shouldn't be talking about this anyways, but I have been in rooms where it's been brought up and someone's had to say, we can't discuss that, where it's, you know, okay, this person is great, we want them at this university, but they have a spouse we now need to find a position for. You don't want that in the back of their heads. That said, because I've had a myriad of opportunities and of applying and experiences, there was one experience where I was told by my wonderful PhD advisor, who has been through this process herself, that I should go into the talk with the department head in my interview, essentially with a CV for my spouse. And the reason for that was, I'm going to be honest, my spouse is a superstar. He's amazing. And so they were like, hey, you can use this as a leverage chip. Obviously, that was something I had to talk about with my spouse, and we decided to not do that in the end. So you'll find that there are different pieces of advice depending upon the situation you're in, what you and your spouse are doing. I saw a question come up about, you know, are you in the same department or are you not? That's a whole conversation in and of itself, but that can also help guide whether you'd want to bring it up earlier or wait until maybe you either have the offer in hand or you're a little bit further in negotiations.
Okay, thank you. So very interesting, some different perspective, and that's, you know, something that each one of us will have to take into account when you're in that stage. Our next question, and this would be answered by Rachel and Catherine. If you are the spouse accommodation, what should you expect in the hiring process? We heard a bit of information when you introduce yourself, but can you touch base on that? Rachel, you want to go first, or Catherine?
I can talk. So I would say that, so I'll base it on kind of my experience as the spouse when Neil originally got hired for Amherst. It's kind of like, I think you should kind of expect that, well, I'll say a lot of it is very, department and institution specific. And so some of it is luck. Like, I was lucky that the geology department at Amherst was going to be in a position that they wanted to hire people in my field in the future. And so that hiring process went a lot differently if I came in as a hydrologist and they already have a hydrologist. So I think like a bit of it is luck, that the spouse is something that is useful to the college, but or the department. But basically I went in, I met with, it was kind of like it was very similar to an interview. I think I didn't do as like formal of a job talk because I think it was rushed and because there weren't any other candidates, but I met with the department, I met with the provost for the college, I met with the diversity person for the college. I was asked like what I would need, so like as a startup to be successful. And so it really was just kind of like a mini version of the same hiring process that you would go through, except there's no other candidates. But yeah, I think, you're just trying to convince them that you're worth having in the department, because it's like they already hopefully want you to come. They're interviewing for you for a reason, and that's because they want your spouse. But you also have to convince them that it's like, wow, you just got really lucky that my spouse happens to be married to me, who is also great. And so yeah, I guess I'll pass it to Kat just to see if she has anything to add.
I agree. I think the experience varies so much depending on the institution, and even within that institution, the different, groups or colleges or departments that you work with. But I think the themes you touched on, I think there's some fairly universal things, like you'll be expect to be asked, what can you teach, or what do you need in terms of startup? Like, be ready with lists of things and don't be shy. Really be honest about what you really, really need to succeed. And but it varies a lot. And in my one experience of going through this, there was a specific process at the university for this specific thing. There was a program that they had established that was specifically it was called the Partner Accommodation Program. And there was a website and everything, but the website had very little useful information. And so it was important to ask a lot of questions. So I don't know, you might expect as part of this process to have to ask a lot of questions, and just be prepared for that, and be persistent and get the information that you need. But it varies a lot from my colleagues and my friends, and knowing other people who've gone through it in different places. I think it's just need to go in and do a lot of digging to see what the deal is.
Yeah, I agree. It varies. And we have here just 4 examples, success stories. But unfortunately, not everyone has success stories, and it doesn't work. Alexandra or Maria, would you like to add to that question before we move on? Alexandra, I see you're like, yes.
Yes.
What would you like to say?
So to Rachel's point, Rachel, you reminded me of this. My PhD advisor, also a woman in atmospheric science, who her and her husband went through, I think, like 7 years of trying to secure tenure track jobs together. When I talked to her about this in grad school, she said, think of it as a 2-body opportunity, for exactly what Rachel was saying, that you have 2 people who are amazing, trying to find jobs together. And sometimes reframing it can really help you in that process, or help you present the best side of yourself to show the department that you are this awesome person. And now they get 2 awesome people instead of 1.
Like that. Maria, would you like to add anything to that? All right. So we're going to move into our third question. And I already seen something like that in the chat. Kath and Maria, you're going to answer on that question. But again, Rachel and Alexandra, you'll be able to share your thoughts as well. Does it make a difference if your partner is in the same field, department, or university? Is it an advantage or disadvantage if both of you are in the same field or department?
Go ahead, Maria, if you want to start.
Sure. So for our situation, we're both in climate, but he's in geochemistry and I'm in atmospheric ocean dynamics. So we are in 2 different departments. I'm in atmospheric science and he's in natural resources or something like this, which I think is good. There are many, or not many, we have 2 couples within the department. I just, like, this is personally from the family perspective, I like not to work with my partner. We actually do. But I think applying to the same job, for example, there was one question like this, I envisioned very hard. I've never heard of this working, but who knows, why not? In my experience, it made it easier just to not overlap too much, because no university independent of a couple has 2 people working on the same thing, right? And even if you do searches, you try to find somebody who is not doing the same as everybody, or is the people who are already there. So I think, and I don't know whether it's even easier if the other person is like in economics, or really, like Rachel, like really different. I don't know, admittedly. I think it depends then on the university whether they happen to have both these fields.
Yeah, I think I do actually know of one example where 2 partners applied for the same job, and not immediately, but eventually both got tenure track jobs. That has happened at least once, to my knowledge. It wasn't me, but I think it does make a difference in terms of whether it's an advantage or disadvantage. I don't know either. One thing I do know is that I think part of the problem is that we call it the 2-body problem. I really, what Alexandria said really resonated with me. It's, you know, it's a team. It's a team with mutual built-in support, and you understand what the other person is going through in a way that nobody else does. And I think there are certainly advantages, and I think that we need to reframe the conversation and the attitudes towards that, because there's this demonstrated success of partners pursuing these kinds of endeavors. And I'm seeing in the chat, people are curious about what we focus on. I'm a paleoceanographer, so climate history of the oceans mostly. And my husband is also in earth sciences and climate. He's a glacial geologist. So I'm the marine part of the equation. He's terrestrial, but obviously they're connected. And for the very first time last year, we actually were on a proposal together that got funded, so that was exciting. But it's not, mostly we don't. Mostly we do things independently. And I don't know, it just kind of, it cuts both ways.
Right, Alex, Rachel, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna add that I don't think it's inherently beneficial to be in the same department or to be in different fields. It just really depends on the client, like kind of the politics of the institution. Like I could very easily see, if let's say the economics department is hiring someone and then they contact the geology department. I mean, the geology department could have just been like, yeah, we're not interested. You can't force us to hire someone. And then that's the kind of end of that. But luckily, there was a need for someone in my like subdiscipline at Amherst. And I also know people, but then it's like, so, and at a bigger school, being in different fields can be a challenge because it just requires reaching out to people that might be like in a completely different school, might be a different provost or a different dean. And so it just takes more people to like agree on making it work. Versus if you're the same, and then, I mean, I know some people that have been hired not for the same exact position at a university, but hired together in the same department, and they ended up using it to their advantage because like they both share a really expensive lab. So they like made that a part of their startup, that they would like share a lab space because they can both use kind of the same instrumentations even though their research is different. So it kind of just, you know, you can use it to your advantage, I think, during negotiations, but it just again, it's like a lot of it is luck, and whether the different parties at the institution like want to play or feel like they have a use for someone with your specialty.
Alexandra, you want to add anything to this point, to this question?
I was just gonna say I've seen it all through all the departments I've been in. I've seen, like, I just wrote, we recently hired in our department 2 people who essentially do the same work, and they're both gonna have tenure track jobs. We've hired people who have had, you know, spousal accommodations in other departments. To what Rachel said, it's very much dependent upon like what the dean and the provost are looking for, what money they have, what the department heads are looking for, and the departments are looking, you know, who they want to bring in. And a lot of it is luck in the end, but I've seen all variations of it work.
Okay. So very interesting, different perspective on things. Another question that we have, and we're going to have Alexandria and Rachel to answer on that. What is the likelihood of us both, you know, me and my partner, offered a tenure track job during a spouse hire? And Catherine and Maria, you will be able to jump in if you would like. Go ahead, Rachel, sorry.
Yeah, it also, again, it just depends on like the institution, and if they have money. In some places it's easy for provost to come in and say, here's your new tenure track line, and then another school, it just is like not feasible at all. And so like when I was the negotiator and trying to negotiate for Neil, I applied for, or it was a targeted hire in both of those cases. In the R1, it was like a kind of targeted hire from the dean or person in charge of like this whole school. And so they had a lot of power. So they were just like, yeah, I've talked to econ, don't worry about it, that sort of thing. Whereas like a smaller school that isn't necessarily rolling in a bunch of money, or if it's on the department level, it's like, they don't have the power to do anything beyond a visiting position. But it does seem, I mean, at least at Amherst, I know several cases where people have been visitors and have gotten in that way. So I don't think it's, so yeah, in my experience, it's a lot more likely that you're going to be offered like a visiting position. And some visiting positions are better than others. Like the one I got was good, you know, paying visiting positions. And then kind of like what was mentioned earlier, there are like kind of shit visiting positions where it's like, we will allow you to say that you are affiliated with us and here's a desk. But yeah, once you're a visitor, I think it is easier to kind of transfer that to a tenure track job.
I don't mean to contradict you, Rachel, but I've seen a lot of people, myself included. You can get a position that's not a tenure track job, and then, I don't like this saying, but it's the only one that comes to mind, why buy the cow when you're getting the milk for free? So you're there, you're working, your spouse is there in the secure job. They don't think you're going to leave. They don't feel they need to offer you anything better. Obviously you can get out of that, but that's just something to sort of keep in mind. I think the likelihood of you being offered a tenure track job, in my experience, it really comes down to almost the same answers as the other question. You know, what is the dean, what is the provost looking for? Do they have that money there or not? I think, you know, Catherine made a really great point, and I sort of followed suit, is that you got to be able to negotiate, and you got to be able to ask what you want. Otherwise, you're not going to potentially even get that, because they might just think, oh, we can give you a research scientist position, or my other position was called professor of practice. That's teaching a clinical position, and you'll be fine. But you have to negotiate, and you have to ask for those things, because sometimes that money is there, but you have to push to be able to get it, particularly if they want your spouse and you there. And you got to think that universities don't always want to spend their money, right? They want to be able to get maybe you two and maybe get someone else with this extra money they saved. So likelihood is kind of up in the air, but you got to push for it. You've got to be ready to ask for it. And you have to, you know, think about, is a transition out of this position that you maybe got that's not a tenure track going to be feasible or not? And that's something you have to reassess over time.
Catherine, Maria, would you like to add to that? All right. So hard. It's hard. I mean, it's encouraging, but it's hard because it really depends on where you're applying to and what they're looking for. But I know for myself, the one thing I heard is always be ready. Prepare yourself. Know, you know, have a package ready in case you will be asked, and understand. And keep in mind that sometimes the two-body problem will be with your spouse is not looking for academia, but you're moving to a place where they can find a job. So it's other things that we have to think about. We've already received a lot of questions from the audience. Some of them were sent directly to question@ESWN, and Remat is monitoring that. I'm going to put the first question in a chat, and I will let each one of our speaker answer that question. If you want to, you don't have to. And we're going to go over some of them because we want to be sure to have enough time to go into the breakout room. So the first question, it's in the chat. Is it technically illegal to use marriage family status information in a hiring decision, at least in most states? I saw some stuff moving in the chat with those things. They're not allowed to ask us if we're married during the interview. Sometimes they do. Have those things raised up when you came for your little interview, or Maria? I know you were the person who were hired. How are those things come up? What do you think?
They come up even though they're not supposed to. And I learned the hard way that you just need to have a ready answer, whatever you decide that should be, whether that's not relevant to this conversation or whatever you want that to be. But I was shocked to be asked some seriously inappropriate questions during interviews. And I just be ready for anything, even if it's not supposed to be topic of discussion. Just be ready with whatever answer you choose to give. Don't be surprised into saying something that you didn't want to share.
Anyone else would like to answer that question?
So I put this in the chat, but one thing to consider is that most of the time people are really good in one-on-one interviews, like sitting in the office talking about research, asking you how you'd fit in the department, or sometimes you'll have panel questions as an interview. But usually when I've had this stuff, I haven't asked straight up once, and I can tell you what I said in a minute, but usually when I've seen this stuff slip up, either from the person, you know, on the interviewing institution side or being interviewed, is during those informal discussions. And I should be very specific, saying that there is no time during your interview where it is not actually formal, but people take it as informal. So like over dinner, you're sitting around a table with all these professors, they're talking about their families, and they might say, oh, what about you? You know, do you have kids? Do you have a husband? What do they do? It's still illegal for them to ask, but they might do that in those situations because everybody's kind of like out of the office, rules don't apply. My go-to is literally say, oh, you know, that's a really great question. Can you tell me about things to do with families in the area? I don't answer if I have a family or not. I haven't taken off my ring when I've interviewed, so they can kind of understand that I have a spouse, but then I'm not giving away any information, and it gives them a chance to talk, which interviewers like.
Another question we had in the chat, for some of you who have been as a visitor scientist for a period of time before you moved to the transition of tenure track, is there a reasonable time to do that when you start, to say, okay, now I'm applying? Because we heard from several of you that you have to have a position in hand to get the tenure track. Is there a period of time you can recommend to say, oh, keep that position for X time and then apply, or right away?
I'll just say that, like, when I was first hired, I got this 3-year job, and it was kind of the person that is in my field at this school was like, oh, it'll be great because right when your visiting position ends, like, I'll probably retire, and then we'll have another position that you can apply for. And I was just like, I'm not sitting around and waiting for that. I was like, I don't think anything after like a year, I was like, I don't think you're ever going to retire. And I don't know about any of this. So I just went out and started. So I think like as soon as you can, basically, I would just keep your eyes open, keep looking for stuff. And when the opportunity, like either you get to in an interview stage, because you can even like, you don't even have to wait for like, I don't think it's necessarily right to blindside the people, like your chair or provost or whoever, with like, oh, I've been interviewing this whole time. I gave my chair a heads up that was like, oh, I'm getting some interviews, or so-and-so reached out and it's looking like pretty good. I think I might like have a good chance at an offer. I was pretty transparent about that. So I had put it on their radar that like I'm looking elsewhere. Yeah.
I would
And
echo that.
that was here too. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I would echo that. Don't wait. Because in a lot of administrations, there's a queue. There's like a long line, and get in the line as soon as possible. Like everybody has things, every department has things that they're asking for and looking for. And sometimes, unfortunately, whether this is right or not, people who've been waiting longer can be prioritized more, possibly. So I would also say don't wait. Start asking. Go for it.
And also, it's not like going to be a surprise to anyone that you want a permanent job. Like if you're hired as a visitor, it's not going to blow anyone's mind that if you're asking like, hey, how could I make this like a full-time, like a permanent thing because I want to stay. Like it's not going to surprise everyone. So you could be pretty straightforward with your motivations, I think.
All right, I'm going to take just a few more questions because I want to be able to move into the breakout room. So another question we have is, when you're searching for a tenure track offer from other institute to use as a leverage at your current institute, are there strategy you use in terms of the reference letters? Sometimes you don't want those people in your institute to know you're applying.
So I can comment on that. So some insight, my current department head is my postdoc, or was my postdoc advisor. And so when I was applying to places, I had to make it very clear why my postdoc advisor was not writing me a letter. And so I had to say, I cannot have this person write me a letter because it is a conflict of interest for them. They want to keep me in the department. They don't want me to leave. I can't have them do that. Additionally, in your cover letter to your application, you can ask them to keep it quiet and not talk to anybody from your department, and not ask, because word kind of gets around. You send out an application, someone's going to read it and be like, oh, I know someone at that institution, let me go talk to them. It's a big, small world, right? And so you can ask to have that sort of stuff kept quiet, but at the same time, to sort of echo what Rachel and Catherine had said, if you can, and I know there are situations where you can't, but if you can have an honest discussion with your department head and you feel comfortable doing that, giving them a heads up can be really helpful to everybody, because it can filter back to them, even if you've said, I don't want anybody to know I'm applying to places. And eventually, you know, you hope you're going to get something, you're going to tell them anyways, and then you're not blindsiding them.
All right, last question. And we've also seen it in the question that came up during the registration. Does it matter if you're actually married? Like, have a certificate to show that you're married to ask for a spouse accommodation? I see someone nodding and another person is doing like this. Can you clarify? Rachel.
I've had I had multiple friends in grad school who applied and negotiated for their now spouses when they were engaged. And also similarly, so like there's someone in my department here. Well, that didn't work out so well, but because anyway, that's a different situation. But yeah, like also I've known people that have done negotiations when they're not like a gay couple where they're not married or engaged at all, but ours. So I don't think so. I think it helps to be engaged because then it's like, or say you're engaged. I know someone who basically just started saying they were engaged before they were actually engaged for the negotiation process. And now they are married, but yeah. So it can kind of make you, unfortunately or not, it can make you feel a little bit more serious than saying like my boyfriend or girlfriend. But I don't think you even need to be engaged to, you know, have someone be like a serious life partner that you negotiate for. So I don't think there's like rules about that.
Okay, interesting. We have way more question coming in the chat or in question at ESWN.